Hello and welcome back to another episode of Supercoach Insider. My name is Ben.
And I'm Swiz.
And thank you for joining us. We are talking about the Geelong Cats, also known as the draft relevant team of 2022, because there's not much else there, ladies and gentlemen. Probably a nice little short podcast today. It's a lot of relevant stuff, though, but I'm sure Swiz, lovely to have you. We will drag this out as much as we can. Before we move on, though, you got a bit of a shout out, I hear.
Oh, yeah, mate, I'm going to give a little shout out today, and that everybody knows them. How can I work my cricket club into the podcast world and that? Big week for us for the 50th, but I promised her I'm going to give her a shout out on the podcast. We have one of our girls, Nilu, who's 15, played her first game in Premier Ones this week. So that's
Jesus.
absolute super effort. She's been playing senior men's and senior ladies since 11 years old, and has already won a club championship and gone off and playing with some of the state girls. So I said to her, I'm going to work you into the podcast somehow. I don't know how I'm going to bring you up in a footy podcast, but no, I'll give her a shout out. That's a super effort by any sports person. So for our football fans who do follow their cricket, watch her come through the ranks in the next few years because she's an absolute brilliant person.
What's her highest score? Do you know, Swiz? Have you asked those kind of
I know
intimate details?
she played a junior rep game recently and reeled off about 85 not out, but she's an all-rounder. So, yeah, she's pretty good for the ball as well. So, I think in her first game of seniors, she took a wicket. So at 11 years old, I don't think I took one till I was about 18. So,
jeez. Hey, what's your highest score, Swiz? Seeing we're on
73 not out, mate.
Right. I made 100 when I was 12 years old and peaked. Highest score I made was when I was 12.
We had a kid on the weekend. First game of under 14s, made 122 not out. A little fucking shit's already 50 runs better than me, but well done to Caleb as well for that. So that's pretty impressive.
I feel ya, but we digress. Before we move on, SC Insider 100 on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch. You can also find us on audio platforms as well. So Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, you name it. And you can also find us on the YouTube. Thank you very much for everyone that's been shouting out the love there, getting those subscriptions. So if you don't follow already, please do like, subscribe, do all that funny business on wherever you are, because otherwise we don't know if you love us. And the love is implied, also known as my relationship with Chris. The love is implied because it's not written on paper. So let's move on and have a look at Geelong. Now, Geelong have not much going for them, to be honest with, except for some, it's definitely notable premiums, some good standard, it's good draft relevancy. And when we have a look at their fixture to start the year, it starts off, Essendon, Sydney, Collingwood, Brisbane, Hawks, North, Fremantle. It's not too bad. Like, it's one of those ones where it doesn't look like it's the easiest draw, but it's definitely not that hard by any stretch of the imagination. What do you think about Geelong this year as far as their hopes, their dreams, and their disappointments?
Yeah, hopefully more disappointments than dreams, but it's either one or two things that are happening for Geelong. This is their last crack, while they've still got Dangerfield, Guthrie, Selwood, Hawkins. So it's all in for them at the start of the year, and they're chasing this flag. If the wheels start to fall off mid-year, we could see a lot of rookies coming through in the next phase of Geelong because, I think that they're all at their peak. A lot of these players are at their peak price. They've been up there for a long time. They're trying to get a flag, fallen short, a couple of times there, especially to us a couple of years ago, which was nice up there in your land, Benny boy. It'll be very interesting to see how they start, and we're going to know a lot about Geelong in the first 6 weeks.
Yeah, I still think Geelong are definitely in the haul this year. I think it'll probably be next year the wheels might fall off a little bit. And the reason is they still have quite a lot of that team together, still a lot of experience. It's just about whether it can, stack up at the right time of the year. Now, if you could choose three of the Geelong's most important, as far as winning a flag, three of Geelong's most important players that need to play all the games and play well for them to win a championship, what would be those three?
I'm going to go Tom Stewart first. He is that rock down defense. How good is he? Intercept marks. A lot of the ball comes out through him. So I'm going to say him, Tommy Hawkins. Even though they've brought Jeremy Cameron in, Tom Hawkins, how many times has been their leading goal kicker? So if it's not for him, we've seen Cameron able to do it himself, but I think Hawkins is just so important, especially those Geelong games. He's just dominated them. And third, well, it's got to still be Danger, doesn't it? And that, like the the man's a freak. Big shout out to Patrick Dangerfield for those that don't know. Down at Moggs Creek, which is his hometown, he saved an 11-year-old girl in the surf this morning. So sometimes people think it can be a bit of a flog for just the way he's on TV, but no, big shout out to Danger Man because that's real hero stuff there. So well done to him for that effort. So yeah, Danger's my other person.
Yeah, definite kudos there. I don't think Danger's a flog. I think he's someone that cares passionately, and sometimes when people are extremely passionate or they care or they have strong opinions about what they stand for, or especially about say AFL in the community, because whether we like it or not, a lot of AFL players look up to him as kind of that standard, and sometimes it kind of might come off a bit arrogant or a bit sort of pompous. Do you know what I mean? Like he thinks he's better than everyone else. But I think he's just one that is really passionate about the game and his role within it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I think if Dangerfield was like part of the Australian cricket team, he'd be treated much differently. But because he's a footballer where people naturally hate the other 17 teams in the comp, and Geelong not the most likable team, more because of their success for a long time. Yeah, it gets a lot more.
But when he was at Adelaide, people loved him.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's one of those things. And you go to Geelong, oh, you're moving for success. It's like, but I'm going home. Like, leave me alone. Yeah. I do think, and if he was an Australian cricket player, he would be kind of like Smitty, except without the controversy.
Yep.
He'd be like widely loved as much as Smith, except hadn't let them down and cried on national TV. So, it's definitely an interesting one. Now, out of those three, how many do you think I agree with?
I'm going to say one of them.
Yep, being Dangerfield. For me, yes, I know like Stewart and Hawkins, I think are definitely, they're stable. And I think you kind of know what you get from them. So Hawkins will take the big one, he'll kick his goals, and Stewart will hold down the other end and get his intercepts and everything like that. But for me, I think the most important players for them this year in order to win a premiership, Dangerfield, number one, when he's fit, he's firing. He is kind of like the X factor, the scoring machine. He's the one that can swing a game off the drop of a hat, depending if he kicks straight. Next one for me is Duncan. And the reason is that Duncan is, I think they need to play him in the midfield, right? Because he's an elite ball user. He's one of their best runners through the middle of the field, makes good decisions, and he's their link player. He links the chains of the scoring, and I think he is definitely one of the most important players as far as taking the ball and actually capitalizing, and they need him fit and firing this year more than anyone. And then the last one I'm going to say is Jeremy Cameron. And the reason is that he didn't perform last year, probably upset by it. But because if Hawkins is taking the main one, they need Jeremy Cameron, Duncan, and Dangerfield, all three of those, to play every game and to play exceedingly well in order for them to win this year. And then you just expect that you'll get your normal role players from your Hawkins and your Stewarts and your Black Halves and everyone else, like they go with that. So that's just my opinion. I think that those three players could be in for a big year because I think Geelong need it if they're going to win. Because otherwise Hawkins just gets a few goals like he normally does. Stewart gets his few intercepts like he normally does, but that does not going to help change the dynamic of them actually winning a premiership.
I was looking at the other way where if they're not playing, they're not winning. If they don't have
that's true.
Hawkins,
I was expecting those two to just keep playing, but yes, you are correct. They are definitely important. Okay, so let's get on to those premiums then. So we've already had a nice little segue on who we rate and why. I don't know why, but we're going to start with Cam Guthrie, the guy that cost me $50 last year, averaged 113.3 for the year, came out gangbusters with a 121 average, then went 97.7 over the next 6 in the middle. And I started to get a bit optimistic, like, hey, if he averages 80, he might actually not average you too well and I might have a chance. But he averaged 119 for the last 7. So he actually came home like a thunder. Swizzy, is there any realm that you are touching him this year?
I should go and see what the wife's doing because she had Guthrie last year. She was so hot on him and I just did not know why. I'm like, it might be the facial hair or just the role for so long. But yeah, what a fantastic year he had. I just don't see him backing it up. I think he can go close to what he got. But yeah, I don't see that, going in a positive way. And what did you say? 113. Yeah, I don't see any value there where we talked about Brayshaw, where I think that's around that Brayshaw mark, that 113 to 115. I think Guthrie drops back to more what Brayshaw had, that 105, 107. So yeah, I don't see there's a reason why I would want to pick him.
I can't see any realm in which I am picking him. And there's nothing against Guthrie. I quite like him, but I don't see the value there. And I completely underrated him last year. Like, obviously, wrongly. I wrongly underrated him last year. But there's no realm in which I'm going to change my ratings and pick him up in a draft league. I will move around him and let someone else take that risk. Why? Because I don't see it as a guaranteed certainty. Um, I think he's a great pick, but it's just not for me. And I'll let someone else take him. Basically, how it is. If I own him, guaranteed he's going 95, and I won't live with myself, and I'll be raging every way, which right and center. So yeah, that's pretty much it for me. Yeah, Swiz draft leagues. Just are you in or are you out?
Yeah, enough. Just avoid at all costs.
Okay. Yep, I'm letting someone else take that train. And Tommy Stewart's the next one, 585,000. January 30, it did say he banked a decent amount of training. We were worried about Henderson. I was worried. Henderson retiring, I was like, is he going to become more accountable? Because we saw with, say, Charlie Cameron, they played Brisbane. He was very accountable, which still might happen with Smalls. But I was worried if, with tall players, who are they going to put in there? Right? So I was like, Jeremy Cameron, bloody hell, Tom Stewart's going to have to play accountable football. He's going to be playing tall. He's going to play lockdown, and it's going to kill his Supercoach potential. But De Koning's been coming through Swiz, and we'll get on to him in the rookies. Tom Stewart looks like he could be in the clear for his usual role and his usual Supercoach output. Starting to get tempted for standard now, Swiz. What are you thinking with Stewart?
Massive fan of Stewart. Really like him. He's the guy that you just know he's going between 80 to 120 every week. And that there's no if buts of that. He takes the intercepts marks, gets a couple of kickouts, does everything right. So, yeah, one of those, standard deviation players where, he's probably nearly one of the best in the league for primos there, because you just know what you're getting from every week. The good about that is I feel confident I can pick him up later in the year. Hopefully, because he's going to be around that same price. He'll probably drop to maybe 550, something like that, but he's not going to kill me with those massive scores. The negative to him, very Luke Ryan-like, and that just does not get through a whole season, and it just frustrates me because I like it. It's 18, 21. He played that one year where he had 22, then 14 and 20. So he just misses the odd game, and yeah, more, especially in draft leagues too, like he's going to be your D1. You don't want your D1 or your M1 or your F1 missing games, and that, because it just kills you that week. There's no covering for those guys. You can get away a little bit with standard sometimes and that, because hopefully you've got the cover there, and it might cost you the 40, 50 points that week, or you might burn the trade and able to get somebody else, but you can't do that burning the trade in a draft league. So it can really frustrate you missing those games, but there's plenty of other players like Whitfield misses games too. So it's a common thing with some of these defenders. So no, I like him.
20 is not bad though.
It's not bad and that, but it's still it just frustrates, and that always it seems to be at the worst time.
Crisp. When you put him against Crisp though, similar price point. Crisp doesn't miss any games, but then Crisp is probably also at more risk of dropping in average compared to, say, Stewart.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where, and even where like Llyod just doesn't seem to miss games, he's around that price again. A lot more people are more comfortable of sort of having Jake Llyod in their team. And it's just that different, like even if it's a one game difference, and anybody can get injured, but if you're averaging 100, and you're putting that rookie on, or you can't cover in that week, it's such a big difference in your league match or even your overall. Because I think I had it last year where, for whatever reason, one of my rookies was missing as well, and I was always going to hold Stewart. And I think the rookie that I had covering scored like 20, so I was 80 points behind those who weren't banking Stewart in. So, he's a very popular pick. He's in 16.5% of teams. I can understand why. If he gets through the preseason, the game's no problem, and scores at 100, probably more going to jump on. It'll probably be 20 to 25%, especially with Aaron Hall going down now, and some might get cold feet about Crisp. But yeah, I think you know what you're getting with him, and I don't see the value.
So he normally plays about third tall or something, doesn't he? And floats off. Is it kind of? It's one of those ones. But the issue for me is that in round 4 they play Brisbane, and he has locked down on Charlie Cameron. So he was killing it, I think, at one point, and then ended up locking down on Charlie Cameron, and then both didn't score or something. It was something stupid. I was like, what's going on? So they're in round 4, which is probably the concern for me. But when you have a look at other parts, you're at Essendon. Who are their forwards that are really killing it? they don't really have that many. Do you know what I mean? That are absolutely dominating or that you're really scared about. Sydney, you have, Buddy and but you have your others, your McDonald's and a few of these others coming through. He won't be on Buddy, I don't think. So again, probably not too bad of a matchup for him to kind of float in and do his thing. Collingwood, a very similar one. He might end up, if a DeGoey or someone's forward, he might try and take one of those more attacking types when they get up there because they're a bit more dangerous. Lions, again, I said it's an interesting one because he can float off and absolutely smash them. But then if someone's on fire, I think Charlie Cameron kicked like 3 or 4 goals, then bang, all of a sudden he's accountable. But then after that, it's like, Hawks, right? Forward line at Hawks, he'll probably dominate. North Melbourne forward line, he'll probably dominate. Fremantle, like Taberner's coming back from an injury. So again, not really that many crazy hot forwards at Fremantle, probably dominates. Giants now have just lost some of their players as well. You know what I mean? So it's like, well, you got Hogan, and then they're talking about playing some other fringe forwards. Do you know what I mean? Himmelberg and I can't think of the other guy. Again, not that many dangerous forwards. So it's kind of like he actually is probably primed to score very well because these teams that they're not playing, it's not until you get to like Port Adelaide that are a bit more dynamic and aggressive. Adelaide are probably easy shoe in again. And then the Bulldogs. So most of the first half of the year, it's not like they're playing against crazy good forward lines.
Yeah, I know, but you just look at these scores that he's had against these teams like Essendon, Sydney, Collingwood starting off. So his last 3 against Essendon, 107, 123, 102. Sydney, 114, 105, 99. Collingwood, 119, 95. That's what he does. I just feel like I'm picking a guy who I know is going 100, 110, and it's great. No different to Jake Llyod. So if you want that security and go, yep, I'm getting what I'm paying for. But even with Llyod, I can see possibly now with Dawson going, there still could be some value there. With Stewart, I'm just thinking I'm getting exactly what I'm paying for. I'm getting that guy who's going 105, and he's going to have that little dip against probably Brisbane, but every other week you'll score between 100 and 110. And there's a possibility. I'm happy to pay for that, but at the same time, I like value. You like value, and I can live without him for now.
Yeah, that's fair. Jeez, average against Brisbane 60 flat.
Yeah, he's never turned up against Brisbane's the only team that he's never turned up against.
That's messed up. But outside of that, so again, Hawks, North, Freo, GWS, I think it starts to kind of really start to increase there. So I'm definitely considering it. I think it's within reason. For me, it's probably a Stewart versus Crisp scenario. And looking at upside and damage ratio, it's one of those tough ones, I feel. So it's going to be a preseason play out for me, and I kind of like my team better with Stewart instead of Crisp. Not going to lie.
Yeah, well, naturally, and Stewart, you're going to want at some point. It's just okay, I've got Stewart, I'm locking him in. I've got my D2, no problems there. And that Crisp, I think there could be some value.
Yeah, but again, how many deep are you going? Because if you go Llyod, Stewart, Short, Whitfield, there's only 2 spots left.
That's right.
So then you say, yes, I can get Whitfield at any point, but then a better price point will probably show up at some point, and then you'll go them instead, and then you'll be without.
Yeah, well, that's
There's not many spots.
Well, there isn't many spots, but at the same time, it's like I think Crisp and Stewart will be probably averaging close to the same this year. I just like the idea of Crisp's role being in that midfield he just does not seem to miss games, and that way Stewart always seems to miss one or two.
Looks like Crisp will be splitting at 1/3 kind of thing, because they're talking about the 4 types of midfielders they need, and he was one of three for that type. Pendlebury, Crisp, Maynard, and Dahlhaus. I can't remember which one was which. So it's I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I am waiting for the eye test. Again, preseason will tell all. Moving on. So pretty much most of the conversation's there, and then half the conversation will be on Dangerfield, and then we'll round out to draft relevance. Dangerfield's another one, 567K. Now, I've heard, I think Corey's big on him, averaged, was it 104.3 over 13 rounds, did come home quite strong in the middle to late part of the year. He started off slow last year. So remember, he got injured. He also came in underdone. So he was very much a risk of, what was he going to play and that kind of thing. So it was definitely up and in the air. I'm waiting to see how he performs in the preseason. I haven't heard much about how he's tracking, though. Geelong have been very quiet. I think they just release some videos now and then about preseason, but I haven't heard much about Danger.
Yeah, mate. Danger's always been one of those guys I don't usually start with, a bit on the dusty mould because, especially because Geelong have go deep in finals, shorter preseason, and they let him build in. And a lot of those years, he's had some injury problems, and he's spent some time up forward early on. But following Danger on all socials, he has been looking rip. He's been surfing, relaxing, doing everything right. Hasn't probably been doing as much with the Geelong boys, but that's natural at his age now. He doesn't need to do the full preseason as normal. It's all about managing his body and getting it right for the right time. You got killed if you didn't bring Dangerfield in last year. Yeah, he had that injury 21. But some of those scores, 184, 134, 165, 169, like Danger, when he's on, he's on. And I hate missing out on those Dangerfield scores. The problem is how many of those midfielders can you fit in, because we're talking about still the premium guys, and there's always that chance Danger could play a game forward if they've got a weaker opponent. Because with him and Selwood and Duncan and Guthrie, all their age now, they don't need them playing full on midfield against your North Melbournes and your Adelaides and West Coasts and whoever else you're going to name as the bottom team. When Dangerfield needs to go in there against Brisbane, Bulldogs, Melbourne, he's going to play probably 70, 80% of the time in the midfield and score massive and win those games for him. So it's just, I get worried about that different workload throughout the season. But it's somebody I really want, and I really hope he gets dual position early, because, you'd love to have him in the forward line.
Oh, for sure. And I think it's all kind of relying on that. And you don't want to kind of jump too early and hope that he gets the sort of dual position, because if he doesn't, you're kind of screwed. In order for him to go and become another top 8 to 10 midfielder, you want him at 115, which means that if he falls short and maybe he averages 108 to 110 or whatever, then it becomes a bit of a fail. And it's just one of those weird ones to kind of put up against. Like, I'll do like the price point. I think he could average 115. But again, it's going to depend on the role. Are they going to throw him in that workload, workhorse sort of midfield mentality, or are they going to sort of push him forward, etc.? So I think he's important to them. If they're going to win a premiership, I think he has to be in there. So it's a wait and see for me. I could definitely be swung, but again, there's not much room in there. When you look at how tightly contested the midfield is, it's hard for me.
Yeah, for sure, and that's the hard thing with Danger, because I feel like Geelong, they know they're going to win enough. They should win enough games at Geelong. It's starting to become not as big of a fortress that it was in the past. Brisbane should have had them last year, but that's just natural because of how they're aging. But Danger and those other boys, Selwood, Hawkins, know this is their last chance, and that they've been going for this premiership for the last few years, keep missing out. So I think they can be red hot to have a proper crack at it. Before the side falls off a cliff. So in his last game against, they got the Bombers first up, his last two against the Bombers, 184, 139. And then his last game against the Swans, last two games against the Swans, 170 and 130. Like, the guy in those important games, round one, he's got every chance he's going to come out and score 150 plus points. He'll go forward, he'll kick his 5 goals 5 or whatever he normally kicks, because he's not the greatest kick at goal, but he'll get all the possessions, does everything Supercoach friendly. So I would love to pick him, but I feel like it's him or Lockie Neal, and there's half a little chance now if in that pre-season game Lockie Neal does spend all his time at the wing or spends more time forward, and then it might be like, you know what, bugger it, I'm going to go against the grain, I'm going Dangerfield. But at the moment, if I had to choose between Neal and Danger, I'm picking Neal.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think he got injured in round 21, was it? 21 Supercoach?
Yeah.
Or something happened. It's an
Yeah.
interesting one. And also, he broke his hand in round 23. So he kind of played through the through the final series with a broken hand, needed surgery postseason. So he was actually, did have surgery at the end of the season. So it was limited, I guess, on that, had surgery on his hand. So I am waiting to see how he goes. You take all the injuries out, he still averaged well. I mean, didn't play. What he got, came in 92 injured, didn't play, came back 75 injured, came back, got a 66, and then went on the heater that we spoke about. So his ceiling's definitely there. I don't mind it more if you're not going for overall and you're going for leagues, then it's definitely a point of difference that could definitely capitalize and hurt your opposition on a week to week basis. And wait and see on his role for that one. So yes, moving on. Let's have a look. Probably more draft relevancy now. We're just going to have a look through. Duncan, definitely standard relevance, so we'll touch on him, and that's probably the next hot contested debate, and then we'll move into the other draft relevance. He's a mid forward this year, which is where the intrigue comes from. If he was a midfielder only, people wouldn't touch him literally at all. But he's 540k. He's a mid forward, 99.2 average over 10 games. Started off like a house on fire, average 117.8 over the first 5. And then things started to kind of, go down a little bit, got injured, dropped his average down to a reasonable amount where he's actually not a bad price point. But there are issues, Swiz, relating Duncan.
Yeah, it's his body, and that's been the case. Like, it's 10 games last year, it's 16 games the year before, and he's injured again. So there's no confidence that when he's on the park, you want this guy in your team. You nearly need this guy in your team, especially as a forward, because he's going to spend large chunks in the forward line and just scores at will. Like, who's going near Duncan when you've got Dangerfield and Selwood still, and Guthrie just runs around, does his thing, and he's just he might be nearly their most important midfielder. It's fantastic when he plays. The problem is it's just his body again. So I think because he's a mid forward, we're all going to end up with Mitch Duncan in our side at some point. And I want to start the guy. There's a few times I've flipped and flopped with him and Dunkley. But, we talk about how deep do you go in the defence, how deep do you go into the midfield. Do you go Darcy and Grundy? There's only so many premium players you can have. And at the moment, I'm like, well, 50-odd% of people have got Dunkley in. I'm more confident on having him because I haven't heard anything negative about Dunkley's body, where Duncan just worries me a little bit there. Benny?
So the issue is that he had PCL injury last year, right? They came in, and what's funny is that I think it was like a month ago, Duncan came out with a video saying that he's on, he's discussing his smart 2022 preseason, right? Even had a video, and I think they're talking about how the midfielder says he's feeling young again and all this sort of stuff. So, right, load management despite feeling young again. So they're managing him, right? And it's kind of like the Hanbury thing where they manage him and he's feeling young. And it's like, oh, wonderful. Yes, we're being smart and we're managing me and we're going to ease into the preseason, and then does a calf. Like, if that doesn't scream old man injury, I don't know what does, because he was being managed already and then does a calf on the way out of increasing his load. That doesn't give me much confidence.
Yeah. And it's a hard thing because, as we said, he's going to be, if he plays, he's going to score 100 and that. And but and it's going to change it up now because I think, it's still 23% of people have Duncan in their side. So I think when people realise he's not there for the first practice, well, they're playing the Tigers this week down at Geelong on Saturday. And then, they'll get the report. So, those who haven't already will probably be looking at swapping him or finding an extra 10K to get to Dunkley. And then it just becomes at what point do you bring him in? Because there'll be a 6-7 week period where he'll be going off, and it'll be just how quickly can I get this guy back into my team? The problem is you bring him in, and we've talked about this with injury players before, like Ryan and Kelly and that, who are injury prone, and Duncan's now at that age where, as you said, old man's injury, picking up calves. You feel like you bring him in 6 weeks later, you might have to trade him out again. And it's a real danger. But at the same time, if he's playing and other people got him, well, you're going to be watching him score 100, 110 every week. So I really don't know what to do with Duncan when he becomes available. He's obviously, you're not starting him. And then where do you take him in a draft because of his injury? Because he's currently listed as the F2.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's so for me, last year, right, he missed the first couple of rounds, came in underdone, was dealing with injuries or whatever it was, right? Then came in basically off bugger all preseason, and then bangs out 117, 92, 133, 149, 98, 125, 121. Right, it's literally ridiculous. So he has, and even over when you look at previous history, so I know, yes, the last 2 years weren't great. 10 games last season, 16 the year before. Before that, it was 22, 20, 21, 22. And then he had 11 games in a season, and then 22, 22, 21. So he has had some issues, but generally speaking, what are we talking? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 seasons of 20 or more. So it's not as dire. I know recent history says, and when you look at age, etc., but as a forward, he is definitely a valuable option. I don't know how bad the calf is. I don't know when he's looking at coming back, but it is, if he doesn't play these preseason games, it's hard to pick him. especially with all the value in the forward line, right? When you have a look at, so Butters is playing midfield, Heaney's playing midfield, you have value at 100,000 cheaper. Dunkley is probably the other one with the upside, but at least he's been playing and training. And there's just so much value that's hard to kind of throw money at all these players, especially if they haven't had a preseason. But his history, though, is from 2017, so an average of 109.8, 106.2, 103.2, 103.6, and even the 99.2. If you take out his injury game, which was like on 10, right, it's still a decent, like, low 100 average. It's like 104, I can't remember what it is exactly. So I think he's definitely top 6 material. It's just about how many games he plays. If he becomes a cheaper upgrade option, I would definitely be looking at him just because of points, and you have to hope. If you're going to win, you have to hope. Like Aaron Hall, fucking A. You have to hope. You have to get them in. Hey, look, they're doing it. They got a good role. They're scoring well. And sometimes you just need to risk it for the biscuit for people that you know will score top 4 in their line.
For a lot of Supercoach, a lot of our teams of the top players are very similar. Duncan, whenever he gets traded in, is going to either make or break. The winner will be talking about this at the end of the year going, I either avoided Duncan when everybody was trading him in, and then he gets injured like the next week and it saved that person 2 trades, or they're going to be talking about going, I jumped on Duncan at the right time and he got on a roll and I was ahead of the pack. And he's going to be one of those players that's going to make or break somebody's season this year.
I reckon it'll be the winner saying, I didn't choose Duncan or Dunkley. Basically, not starting them was a slam dunk because I went Heaney and Butters at F1 and 2.
Quite possibly, mate.
That's
possibly.
the feel. That's the feel I've got this
year.
It's
the feel I get. It probably ends up being the other way round. Goes,
possibly.
I started.
Yeah,
Duncan,
I didn't start Duncan or Dunkley, and my season got fuckly to begin with. So, it's an interesting one. So for me, I am definitely keeping an eye on him because he can average you high 100s, and it's not a stretch. Like, he is a player that can capitalize and score you 105 on average without breaking a sweat. So, okay, moving on. So for me, in draft leagues, I don't mind taking that risk because, it's one of those ones you hope he plays, and when he does, he'll win you games. And if you don't, then, well, fuck, hopefully you've drafted well enough in all your other lines to capitalize. So, alrighty, now let's go into some draft relevancy. Mengola had knee surgery in Perth in October. So I think after they lost, working his way back to full fitness, that was probably in January. So repairing his meniscus. So that's going to be an issue for me. Mengola, I don't know if he's coming back from an injury, whether he gets pushed forward to the flank or something, might get DPP. The next one is, I don't know how I feel. Selwood, I'll probably just let someone else pick him. It's, I don't know, age. If he's there and it's sliding and he's, you're into the 90s average and he's still sitting there, then maybe. I think that's flexible. Hawkins, 93 average. Yeah, around that, sharing the forward times for me. Nothing really screams here at me. Like, I think Henry's got a bit of scope to improve his average. But Parfit's been sidelined for the offseason. Jeremy Cameron, I think, is a big slider. If he's fit, Jeremy Cameron could be pushing more than Hawkins. I'd rather pick up a Cameron if he's fit at an 81 average. I think there's scope for him to go, low to mid 90s. So draft relevance, but at the moment it's kind of a bit of a wait and see for the preseason and a little bit of a hit and hope. Swiz, who are you keen on?
Yeah, the problem is it's not a huge amount of value. I've seen Selwood going where he's probably meant to be going, later on. But people just, you see him there, and like keepers obviously different, but standard league, people are like, well, it's Selwood, he's still going to, go 85 and have weeks where he's going to go 120. So they're picking him up. Hawkins has, been such a good player, somebody who I've had in standard and some, even last year at the right time. 101, then an 85, then 105, then 93. We know what he does in Geelong, and if they have a big bank of Geelong games, he just scores through the roof. But again, he might be the one that slips a little bit further because people are like, oh, well, key forward, and there's so many other role players this year, and Jeremy Cameron a bit in that. So sometimes people look at the key forwards when you've got, thinking, well, Fife or Dangerfield or Mengola or all these guys could become dual position players. They're sliding a little bit, so you can get a little bit of value in there, but all the other ones are going really where they are. So, if you're happy to pay for at that position. You look at then and you're weighing up a few players and go, well, I know what these guys can do, but they just don't thrill me, a lot of these Geelong players. Mengola does a little, but that's somebody at the same time. It's like, how many weeks is he going to be missing? I don't really want people picking him up still. So it's like, well, it depends how deep my bench is, because I know he's going to have to be sitting on the bench for the first half, few games of the season, and then he's going to play forward, so he's not going to be scoring great anyway. And then I'm hoping he then picks up dual position, which might not be till round 12. And then if you're in a draft league and you're only playing 14 rounds or whatever anyway, it's like, well, I've kind of wasted a pick there. So even him with some I just don't see any value with Mengola as well. So you start have to look at your Mark O'Connors or your Seglers or those sort of players who are going real late in drafts. I think in one draft I was in, O'Connor completely went undrafted, and Segler went about round 18. So there you start getting your value of those players. But even like, I don't like your Dahlhauses, I don't like your Higgins. They've just got so many players who, just with their age, they're just going to keep rotating. They're going to come in and they play their role, but I just don't see them as good Supercoach scorers.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And even Higgins, right? He basically, I think he tried to jumpstart 2022 preseason to make sure he's a solidified place in that 22. But he could easily be a couple of bad performances away from just getting replaced by a younger, fitter, more agile person. It's not uncommon, and I quite like Higgins. You know what I mean? But he's been doing it for quite a while now. I think it's like 33, and I think he does provide a lot. He could have even been a sub for them last year, so it wasn't his best year by any stretch of the imagination. I bank him in to be best 22, but I wouldn't be picking him in draft hoping to rekindle 100 average. That's not the Sean Higgins you're going to get. And especially with these subs these days, he'd be a pretty good sub because you get a leader guy who can still make it and play anywhere from a quarter to 4 quarters. And you know that if someone goes down and everything starts to fall apart, that at least you have a stable head that has composure that can come in and do a job.
And he can play
So
anywhere, so you can infill the
he can
different
play.
roles.
He could intercept and use his foot if you push him in the back line, or you can put him in the midfield and do a job for a couple of quarters or kick some snags. So, yeah, he's a very dangerous one for me. And I don't think I'll be picking him up in draft, even though he's sliding and he can score you a 90 average. Maybe it's your last bench option if I'm desperate, but I'd rather pick a youthful player with more upside. Because if you get Higgins, the best he's going to get you is a high 80, right? I don't think he's going anything better than that. Whereas I'd rather pick a younger player to have more scope to kind of push high, over the 90 barrier and actually extend, kind of like the Ollie Wines did previously, and the Clayton Olivers, how they were averaging at 80 and then went 100 and pushed the next level. And I'd be looking at more speculatives in draft, because once they go, if you are doing well in draft, you won't pick them up again.
Yep.
It's the waiver wire. Someone else gets them.
You can't even say they've got like mid prices that I'm looking at. Even Stengel, who's come in at 247, like, yeah, he's going to get games. He could lock down that small forward role. But at the same time, it's a small forward. They just don't excite me in Supercoach, not at 247. If he was like 123, I'm like, yeah, Stengel, bring him in. But yeah, 247 is such an ugly price for a small forward. So yeah, outside maybe a couple of the rookies that we'll get in the moment, there's not as much relevance compared to a lot of the other sides. Isaac Smith was one that I've had in the past, but he sits on his wing and gets that 90 points. But everybody knows Isaac Smith. They see him there, they go, oh well, he can probably do roughly the same, and people are willing to grab him at what his price is. And I'm not willing to pay overs or reach for them in a draft to get them. So yeah, it really comes. Tom Atkins last year, he had his breakout last year, so he's not doing that again. That you're paying for what you get for him. So yeah, I think we may as well move on to the rookies, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think you're 100% accurate there. Yeah, it's pretty much it in a nutshell, to be honest, isn't it? So Narkle's one that intrigues me at 327, the only one that has any kind of possible upside if he gets his body right. For me, it's pretty much a two-man show, De Koning and Stephens. I'd like to say, Shannon Neal. Apparently they call him Nolly because what about me, Mr. Shannon Neal? Shannon Neal? I don't know. Nearly nailed it. But yeah, I think if we start off with De Koning, because he's probably the more intriguing one, and we spoke about this when we were talking about Tommy Stewart. They needed someone to go and fill it in. And it's funny because literally 5 hours ago, there was a video posted from Geelong and he's put on some size. Like usually you kind of go, okay, Koning 204 centimeters. We knew he was a bit of a beanstalk. And he looks a decent size enough to be able to handle his own and still be mobile enough to actually get around and kind of push off. And it's very impressive. So I think from his draft year, it was probably about 77 kilos. It looks like he's weighing in about 10 kilos more at the moment at 87. He did say in the first year or two, it's pretty much like, basically the Stanley approach. You come into a club and, hey, eat plenty of beefcake and lift weights, mate, because you're skinny as little fuck. And he's put on some good size. And he even said that was a big focus of his. He's been talking to the dietitians and the performance team to put on some size. And he's at a size now where they reckon he can probably maintain that weight for the next sort of 5 to 7 years, probably around the 87 to 90 sort of kilo mark, which is probably where he'll want to sit. And that's good though, because now if he's still fit enough, then he'll get used to his size. The running will become easier because his body's used to actually that load to run through his joints in his body. And he can really start to push off. They rate him. Jenkins was talking about him pretty much. This is a kid, like he highly rates. This kid is extremely talented and he expects him to absolutely blow up this year. Not that I take much weight to what Jenkins is saying because let's face it, he talks a whole bunch of shit. But he is someone that's on my radar. Now, when we talk about it, De Koning probably plays defensive line. He spoke out today saying like, yes, he's been obviously a bit of a swing person in the past. He's played forward last year, which he thought was great, but he's settling down back. He's going to be playing key sort of defensive position. He was on Hawkins and Radaglia in some of the intra-club and some of the training drills they were doing. And he's actually got a good mark on him too. So he can float off and get a mark. And once the ball hits the contest, he was peeling off Hawkins. He was pushing Radaglia under the contest, which is very easy, let's face it. I think he's very talented. And as a swing player with a defensive forward, if you're going to go at Coleman, I think he's a perfect swing option. Any one of those forward defender status players, I think he's going to be worth an extremely a good amount. It's just his scoring potential, Swiz.
Yep. And the scoring potential, it's because, you're playing key defense. But he'll be 21 by the time he starts the season. I think it reminds me a bit of Noah Bolter coming through. I think people underestimate, like when Bolter was, learning and putting the size on at the same time he's training with Tom Lynch, Jack Rewald, who two of the better defenders. Barras the same, you're training with Kennedy and Darling. So De Koning training with Hawkins and Jeremy Cameron, arguably the two best forwards in the league at the moment. Every session that he'd be doing as a defender is working with those guys and learning against the two best forwards. So the only thing that was holding him back is just putting that size on. He's got the size. We know he was an early draft pick. He was a first-round pick. He's been in the system now and spent that whole time just, learning from these guys, bulking up in the gym, as you've said. And you look at like
signed a contract too.
Signed the contract, so they've got that much. They've got faith in him. They love what they see. You're going to get the odd intercept mark. He's going to be that key defender who doesn't score as well. And I look at, like, we didn't talk in the Freo pod about like Joel Hamling, for example, who's I think he's about 270 coming back. But at 100, like, I wouldn't want to touch him because of his price, because, the defenders are going to score between that sort of 40 and 60 points each game. But at 123,000, this guy hasn't left my team, because even if he's scoring 40, 50, 60, we saw how valuable Cozzy was as a forward doing that last year. But as a guy who's, we know he's going to be locking down defender. They need him. They've retired Henderson. So he's got the position. He's not going anywhere. He'll get the odd point kick out. He'll get the odd intercept mark. I'm happy for him to sit there as my D7, D8, and when I need him, bring him on the field if I've got somebody missing. And I know I've got 50, 60 points sitting there, and he can play up to the buy, hopefully make $150,000. It's just a no-brainer. Hell, he's only in, 29% of teams. That he should be one of the highest owned rookies, because we're short of defensive rookies at the moment. We saw last year there weren't many going around, and this kid's just going to be a lock-in in Geelong's defence.
How many big boy forwards are there that are really hard to match up on? Like Dixon.
That's the first thing.
Hawkins is on the same team, so that's easy.
Hawkins and Cameron are on the same team, so two of the best ones he doesn't have to play against.
And when we look at the draw again, Essendon.
Well, he's Essendon's first game, so it's probably either 2 meter Peter or if they're playing Jones, if he gets the second one, and they, so I'm not too worried about him on there. Sydney, well, they're going to try to avoid putting him on Buddy if Buddy's playing.
I agree. Buddy will probably be up the ground a little bit.
So he might have to go up against Reed, or he might even get like a Blakely or
a McDonald or something.
Yeah, or something like that.
Pretty decent.
Pies, what's that, Myercheck? And that, it's not. But then Myercheck's probably plays a little bit more small. I can't.
Or depending
Cox.
if they play.
He probably gets Mason Cox.
Yeah.
Which because of his height and that. So it's not until probably Joey Danaher, because of the height factor in round 4, that he's probably up against somebody that might expose him. The Hawks and North Melbourne the next 2 weeks after that. And then even Freo, he's probably
Taberner probably by that point,
or even Tracy if he's playing and something. So they're going to try to probably get him the second forward, but the more tall one, or maybe the resting ruckman. So he's
and hope he's more mobile and agile to be able to burn them off once it hits the ground or whatever. Yeah, I don't mind him. I think and again, if you're picking like a Coleman or someone else, which I'm now starting to get hot on. It definitely provides that flexibility. If you put him in the forward line, you put Coleman in defense, or vice versa. It definitely just helps give some of that stability and flexibility. If things aren't quite working out, then bang, you can throw Coleman to whichever line is starting to struggle, and then away you go, and your team is now looking magnificently better.
The perfect world. We really need Will Kelly from Collingwood to get himself in that side, because could you just imagine able to loophole one from F8 to D8? And they'll be the perfect player. But, I still think he should be picked by everybody.
Yeah, no, I'm still with you there. So, and the next one is obviously Cooper Stephens. Now, Cooper Stephens was drafted, I think it was like end of first round, and they highly rated him too. So Stephens is one that they have been wanting, and I think they rated him. So I've been watching him for about a season and a half now. I think, how long's he been on the list? Like 2 years? It's been a little while, or at least a year. I've waited.
Yeah, I think I've waited a little 16. While. I was just trying to think. It was in the same year as the Koning's year, but he's but he was definitely picked 16 in 2019. So again, he's been in the system those couple of years through the COVID. Probably hasn't able to play as much, because there hasn't been as much VFL down as we would have liked down here. So probably hasn't had the chance to develop as quickly as he would have liked. But
he looks like
the thing is, he's a local boy. So unlike Clark, that was always the worry that he was going to go home. Cooper Stephens, there's nowhere else for him to go. So I think they've probably gone, well, we'll take our time with him. He's going to be that future playing down on that wing. And I think, like, in a perfect world, I'd love him to start. And you never know, they might bring him in sub, or he might be that 22nd player. But I feel like he's more likely to be get some games throughout the year, or if Geelong's wheels were to fall off, then you would see, okay, we're going with Cooper Stephens. He's our man now, because we're going to get games into him. But he's definitely going to play this year. It's just about when.
Yeah, no, I think I'm pretty well on the same train here. He's one that he's been in my side for a lot of the preseason, but now it's kind of, wait and see. He's definitely in the mix for me. He was definitely frustrated not getting much of an opportunity the first couple of seasons. Again, there was no real VFL and a whole bunch of other stuff that was missing.
He fractured his leg as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So injury kind of is. So apparently he's come in, looking at a high focus on preparation, which is good for a younger player to come in and really be focused and channeling that energy into preparation and getting ready for the 2022 preseason. He actually got together and moved in with a couple of teammates and basically went 10 weeks solo, just smashing out preseason before, when the off season hit, he just smashed out a whole bunch of his own preseason work and came in to the preseason officially in good nick. So it's one of those ones where I guess if you're disappointed and you're feeling fresh, then you want to come in raring to go. You want to come in putting your best foot forward. So he had a real good chunk of bit of training in the off season when they can't officially be told what to do, and he smashed out a whole heap. So he's one that I'm definitely keeping an eye on. With the Higgins and these other guys, he's definitely something that could easily just completely take advantage. And he's just trying to put his best foot forward, and that hunger and determination is for me why he's on my watch list.
Yeah, and with Duncan and Mengola likely to miss early games, they might go with him because he is that sort of that midfielder with a bit of speed that he could play
And
on the
he's
wing.
tall.
Yeah, that
And
too.
he's
So
188 centimeters. So he's a tough inside midfielder who's 188 centimeters tall. So he's definitely got some caliber that they could use.
and clearly that's why Charlie Constable's been moved on, because they got Cooper Stephens in there anyway. So he's the more likely one for the future. But it just
He's probably better.
my worry is if they don't start him with Duncan and Mengola out, and that when they come back, you're waiting for the Geelong cliff to fall off, and we could be talking about him next year as a 117k rookie, because he might have not, but I still think he's got to get the opportunity at some point this year, because he's doing everything right.
I agree. Doing everything right. He's ready to go for 2022. He looks like he's a decent size as well. Like aesthetically, looks like he's built solidly enough. Looks fit. Looks strong, and he's definitely on my list. And as far as cheap rookies go, there's not many of them, to be honest. So he's one that you can definitely lock in. I think him and Mead are probably the ones that have been hanging on, looking at for at least the last couple of years. Was it Mead from Port Adelaide? The two that definitely deserve an opportunity and have been lined up for a couple of years to do so. So they're the easier ones for me to pick if they are getting a gig. So I think that rounds us up, Swizzy.
Yeah, the only other one I wanted was Toby Conway, but unfortunately they went out and picked up Segler. So it's sort of made him null and void, but he's probably the best ruckman in the draft this year. So maybe one just to watch for future development, because
so
obviously Stanley's getting on and Segler's getting on. So they're probably going to have him develop for the next 2 years. And I think, if we revisit like the Geelong podcast in 2 years' time, we're going to be talking about Toby Conway. But that's just something to keep on track for future podcasts.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. So when they went and got in Segler, what you're saying is that his opportunity gone away?
Oh, Benny Boy and your dad jokes. Love it, mate.
Hey, I had to work hard for that one. That does wrap us up. Geelong, everybody. So thank you very much. Again, this is probably a little bit of a shorter one, so this will be in one take on the YouTube. Thank you very much. I think we'll get together and do a few more, hopefully on Wednesday, if Chris can fulfill his legally binding obligations. We'll see you then.
See you later.
51 minutes, Swiz. What the fuck?
What?
How did we talk about Geelong for 51 minutes, everyone?
Oh, well, why not?
Wow, a bit of long-winded stuff there, everyone. Oh, the Wizard Masters. Anyway, that's it from us. We'll see you next time. Thank you very much for tuning in. Let us know who you're hot on this year, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye. 52 minutes.